Well, here we are, Season 3 of Digging Star Wars. Let's get started. Hello, you're listening to Digging Star Wars, your online journal of the films that inspired George Lucas to create the Star Wars saga. I am thrilled to once again introduce Mr. Phil Congleton.
Hey everybody, how's it going? This is my third time. This is awesome.
That's right. You are the returning guest. You're like in the what's the SNL club when they're on there like 10 times.
The alumni,
yeah. The alumni. Phil, who is our guest, also runs a podcast called Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies, which I've had the pleasure of being a guest star on in 2 different episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And Phil has helped me out over the past, 2 years now. We've been doing Digging Star Wars with a lot of audio work and being a guest each season. We've had a lot of fun together doing this, and we're so glad that you joined us to talk about one of the great filmmakers in American film history, Buster Keaton, and his film, 7 Chances, and how it applies to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So, before we get started, and I know you're typing over there, normally we get in and we explain the films and everything else. Right off the bat, without giving too much away, how much have you seen of Buster Keaton's work, and where does 7 Chances fall on what you've seen before?
Well, we started the Dying Breed Movie Club back in 2006. And since then, I've seen Steamboat Bill Jr., The Cameraman, and The General.
Okay.
And they're all amazing. And yes, I'm embarrassed to say that I never really saw Buster Keaton until then. Until 2006. I think you may have given me a collection on VHS shortly before that.
Right, with the sap head.
Which I saw a couple other ones.
1 Week, I think, is in there.
So let's say maybe in the last 10 years, I've actually started to get into Buster Keaton. So I was a middle-aged man by the time. I followed Laurel and Hardy, did a little bit of Chaplin, was more into Abbott and Costello and the Marx Brothers and Martin and Lewis, and kind of avoided some of the earlier silent stuff, except for Laurel and Hardy. I used to love the silent Laurel and Hardys.
Right. Buster's sort of that forgotten man a lot of times when it comes to the silent era. I mean, I know film historians and true film geeks, they know of him, but when you think of silent films without knowing much, you usually think of Chaplin. I think he's the first one that comes to mind. He's an easy, iconic figure to recognize. Buster is he's iconic in his own way with his hat and whatnot, but he really was an amazing man, and not only did he act in these comedy films and direct and whatnot, but he did these amazing stunts. Probably broke every bone in his body at least twice, and also really played and experimented with the camera, and has a very impressive list. I know a lot of his films are on the AFI's Top 100 list. I know Sherlock Jr. is probably his most celebrated film, and The General is usually the film they make you watch in film school, and thank God that they do, because The General truly is amazing.
The General is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a really...
I can't imagine them doing that today.
Yeah. It's an incredible film, and The General itself, although not referenced within Episode 1, the context of the film, prior to when Episode 1 came out on StarWars.com, they had these featurettes, and they had George Lucas and little snippets behind the scenes of him working. Well, one of the first featurettes they had was George Lucas in his office at Skywalker Ranch sitting down to write. And you would see a couple of the slug lines of the script, and you really didn't know what the story was going to be about, and how old Anakin was going to be, and all this other stuff. But one of the shots of him writing is him not writing, but sitting in his chair watching a TV where there's all these VHS tapes around him, and he's watching an excerpt of The General. And I mean, I'm already a huge Star Wars fan when I was watching this featurette, but when I saw that, and I saw George Lucas watching a film that I like so much, and a filmmaker I like so much, it really got me excited, and it got me excited for Episode 1. So it was interesting that when Episode 1 came out, and the mixed reviews that it got from the older fans versus the seemingly happy reviews for new fans, I found myself defending a lot of things, particularly that dealt with Buster Keaton, because I'm partial to the guy. I really liked the guy. I mean, I was introduced to Buster Keaton before film school, thank goodness. My mom and dad gave me a book, The Complete Films of Buster Keaton, because I caught some of his movies on some UHF station, and I just became obsessed.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, back then when I got this book, it's like, how can I see more of these films? So it's kind of cool how technology has caught up, because both Phil and I, in regards to watching Seven Chances, were able to watch the whole film on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So I will post a link when I post up this episode on Digging Star Wars, the blog, a link to the YouTube link to at least get to part 1. Yeah. So you can literally listen to this episode and boom, go right and watch the movie online and it doesn't cost you a nickel.
And as soon as part 1 ends, right at the bottom is part 2. Yeah. Click on that and move on.
And it's a really good print. Mm-hmm. It's a good quality print, and it's worth checking out.
You iPad users, if you have the cables to hook into a television, definitely do that, because I actually plugged into my video projector, so I was able to see it on a big, huge screen. So I would plan on doing that also. Sorry.
No, that's cool. No, so you've seen, you gave just a handful of films. You saw Seven Chances. What's your initial thoughts on Seven Chances, where it falls into things?
Well, in the Dying Breed Movie Club, we go by a book called The 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, written by Stephen J. Schneider. Mm-hmm. The General and Steamboat Bill are in there, and
Sherlock Jr. is too.
Yeah, and Sherlock Jr. is too. And I was like, I can see why these films are amazing. Just the stunts, the things he did, the camera work. I noticed that he directed this one, Seven Chances. I'm not 100% sure if he directed any of the others.
Sherlock Jr. he did, and The General he did.
He did, okay.
And what was the other one we mentioned?
Well,
Cameraman, I think he did.
To make a long story short, I'm kind of surprised this one is in the 1001 movie book. I'm not going to crush it, but I still was a little bit surprised. You know what it is? It probably has something to do with, being as it's 2012 now. We've seen every story under the sun since then, and you have to remember that you're watching something at pretty much the dawn of film, and you're watching this and you're going, I've seen this story a million times, but then again, it may be actually the first time this story has ever been told.
Yeah, Yeah, no, I mean, I know the Three Stooges did 2 takes of this, 2 different films that were a version of this, and the 1990 film The Bachelor was pretty much this story as well.
Yep. I mean, this story I've seen this a million times. I mean, in a million ways.
I like Seven Chances. I don't like it as much as the other films, and I know people listening are like, well, then why did you choose to talk about this one? This is one that, again, when I started my list of films that...
there is a reason why you picked this, I'm sure.
Yeah,
let's hear it, because I want to know, too.
But the film was listed on IMDb as one of the inspirations for Phantom Menace. And again, having that connection with that featurette, I was like, I know Lucas was looking at Buster Keaton. So what exactly is it? I will get to that, but let's set up Seven Chances and talk about that a little bit more, and then we'll get into the connection to Phantom Menace. Normally, when we introduce a film, we have the case of the DVD or the VHS or whatever, and for this, we both watched it online. However, Wikipedia has a very short synopsis, which I feel is adequate to set this up. Of course, as we talk about the film down the road, we're going to give some spoilers, but this is a really short paragraph, which I think perfectly explains what Buster Keaton's Seven Chances are about. And the plot goes like this. Again, this is as listed on Wikipedia. Jimmy Shannon, played by Buster Keaton, is a partner in a financial brokerage firm that is on the brink of financial ruin when he is presented with his grandfather's will, according to which he is bequeathed $7 million on the condition that he marry by 7 p.m. on his 27th birthday, which happens to be that same day. Shannon, that's Buster Keaton's character, with the help of his partner and lawyer, must find a bride. So that pretty much sets up the film, and then hilarity ensues.
Yeah, it's your basic plot. $7 million are on the line.
Yeah.
He needs to get married by 7. they're basically obsessed with the number 7 throughout this movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, basic, and the fun ensues.
Right. So, Seven Chances, Buster Keaton's film, it was based on a play by Roy Cooper McGrew. The co-producer acquired, Joseph Schenck and I guess Louis B. Mayer, acquired the rights to this and gave it to Buster. He actually was upset because Buster enjoyed creating a story from scratch, and here he acquired a play and felt, well, now I'm tied to the conventions of the play. And as a result, when he did this film, and after he completed it, Buster would say throughout his entire career to his dying day that Seven Chances was his least favorite film that he ever made.
Wow.
Which is saying something that Buster Keaton's saying that.
So maybe I noticed something that he did too.
Yeah. And what's funny is, like, I mean, look at the size of this Buster Keaton book. Buster made hundreds of films, from one reeler, two reelers, all the way up to features and whatnot. But as a lot of critics agree, which I think is funny, it may be his least favorite, but it doesn't mean it's not still phenomenal and hasn't inspired a lot of works. We mentioned it, 3 films alone, 4 if you include Phantom Menace for the one gag it took. So, and there's a lot there. There's a lot in the film that I really liked. I really liked, like you said, how they're obsessed with 7. You have, he's getting $7 million if he's married by 7 p.m. on his 27th birthday. They go to the country club that's near their office. They go through 7 girls that he proposes to with all different types of results.
Which, well, we'll get to that later, but something about that bothered me too. But
yeah.
The film does get better as we go along. So,
yeah, and that's pretty much it. I think the reason that people do like this film, and I'm in that category, is it has really phenomenal gags that he pulls off. One of my favorites.
I thought he started off slow though with the gags. I thought.
It was more, I think, kind of traditional pouty Keaton in the beginning, like a lot of medium shots, and you're just kind of getting this almost tramp-like figure, and then he builds up, and I think it's really well orchestrated that you don't have a lot of crazy physical stuff because he seems to be a very mild-mannered character, and the fact that it gets so physical at the end is what makes it so funny. And one of my favorite gags is after a long day of going through proposing to person after person after person and being either rejected, laughed at, or turns out he can't marry them, he goes to the church that his partner says, if you can't get, your girlfriend to marry you or propose to anyone else, be at the church at this time, I'll get someone there. And the guy goes and puts an ad in the paper, and hundreds of women are going to show up. But before that, Keaton gets to the church, he's by himself, and he falls asleep in a pew, and unbeknownst to him, but beknownst to the audience, woman after woman, bride after bride.
Now that was a great shot.
Enters that church, and of course they're older, they're heavier, they're all kinds of types of women. And it's very funny because when he wakes up, he literally wakes up between 2 brides. They realize who he is, and it's about to become a really crazy scene. And then the padre comes in, the pastor comes in or whatever, and says, "Oh, it looks like you're the result of a practical joke." And then this incredible chase sequence begins because now all these brides who wanted him now are angry at him, and it goes. All this stuff goes through. The chase goes through a construction site. It goes through the hills. It goes through the city. It breaks up a police parade, and it's really football game, and it's really funny. And just when you think like, well, they can't top that physical scene or that environment, they do. Yeah. And of course, you have your anticlimactic, climactic type ending too. But I think that's why a lot of critics like this film, and it's certainly why I like the film. I was curious if that garnered any points in your book when you got to that part.
Well, if you back up just a hair, he goes to the one, what was it, a hotel they were in when he walks in and goes, "You have 7 chances."
Oh, that's like a country club.
It was like a country club. That's right, it was the country club. Yeah. He walks in and goes, "You have 7 chances." So I'm thinking, okay, cool. There's going to be a cool story here going on about him chasing 7 girls around this house.
Right.
Well, 7 turned into 7,000, and I'm like, okay, what's? Well, you lost the whole 7 chances thing.
Right.
The 7 chances thing is now out the window.
Right.
But that's okay. They get in the church, and he's asleep in the front pew, and everyone starts coming in and sits down behind him. and he gets up, and then the chase begins. And I love the chase. Usually in a Buster Keaton movie, the chase is always the payoff,
right?
You know, so I was glad to finally get to the chase. Get it? Get to the chase.
Well played.
So there's the only part I didn't like about the chase was when they were all going down like the street.
Oh, you didn't like that part?
Well,
this part right here.
Yeah, because I'm like, can he hear them walking behind him?
Well, I think that's the beauty of it being a silent film.
Yeah.
Like, because, you know, in watching this, and I think this is very interesting watching this film so close to the artist, you know, and all the hoopla with the Oscars this past year with the artist.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, is that you forget that their world has sound, you know, and because I think that's a very good point. Like, of course he would hear them. It's a mob behind him. So when he's shocked by it, it kind of adds like a second joke on top of it. Like, of course he should have heard it, you know?
Yeah.
So, but I think it's a good point.
Yeah, but then after that, it goes into that part where it's Buster, it's a chase, it's slapstick,
right.
It's comedy.
It's really quick.
And I guess you need to forgive those kind of things, you know, and I did, and the rest of the movie is just, you know, just as good as The General, just as good as Steamboat Bill, you know. Fortunately, it's got the end.
right, yeah.
Fortunately, it has the chase.
When they go into the construction site, and there's a construction worker on the crane, and then 3 women hop, like literally force the guy out of the crane and then hop it, and they're picking him up. I'm like, why is this so familiar looking to me? I was like, that's Jedi. Like when Chewie and the Ewoks go in the walker and they throw out the guy, and then they're in the walker and they're like shooting up the other walkers on Endor.
Yeah.
And it's the same type of shot, that 3 shot of like, you know, because there's one woman in the crane who's running all the controls, and the other 2 are kind of like admiring the fact that this, you know, this woman, you know, this scorned bride has grabbed the controls of this thing and is taken over. And
well, going a little bit further into that scene, she hits a lever and Buster ends up behind a fence.
Right.
Lets go and takes off.
Right.
Well, they bring the crane back up and a train goes by, and she thinks, and her friends think that she just killed her.
Yes. Yeah.
Or killed him.
Yeah.
And the one girl goes, "You just killed him." And I'm like sitting there feeling so sorry for that old woman. She's like, for I guess about 20 to 30 seconds, you're thinking Buster's dead and these people think they killed him.
Right.
You know, and then all of a sudden he shows up again and they start chasing after him again.
Right.
But I was like, I just felt so sorry for that old woman. I'm like, oh my God.
You know,
it just stops right there, you know?
Yeah. No, it's funny. And I think that's, I mean, and Buster's humor, like he has a lot of the slapstick physical humor that you see in the Marx Brothers and the Three Stooges. And I know I'm extremely biased because I'm a fan of his work, but what I like about Buster's work is while you also have that slapstick, there's also definitely a thinking man going on. Like he is a bit of a fool because he gets himself into these bad situations, these poor situations. But he also can just engineer the simplest thing to work to his advantage. Physically, you know, and mentally.
Let me just, I don't know if it's fool is the right word. When I see Buster, I always think more of just like a man-child.
Yeah.
You know, like
there's a little sense
he's not really stupid, he's just ignorant, you know?
Right.
You know, he just doesn't know things, and he doesn't have the experience. That blank face he always uses, you know, there's no emotion, so you're like, you know.
Why isn't it hitting him?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to interrupt, I just, you know.
No, it's cool. And how he does emote is with his body. It's the double take. It's the turnaround. Him seeing something, walking away, and then stopping and looking back because it just registered what he saw, which is a great silent film gag. What was also funny is when he's talking about referencing other films, there's a scene where he goes in a country club and he proposes to, you know, the 7 different girls individually, and there's a shot where he's kind of gone through all 7 in there, and then he comes out, and he's got this one girl, and he thinks he's got it. You know, it's the gag turns out that she turns out to be a teenager.
Exactly. Right? There was a lot of weird stuff going on in there.
But in that one scene, he has that girl, and he walks out, and all the other girls he proposed to are in a group bunched together. And there's a shot of Buster, proud as can be, and there's a shot of the girls laughing. And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I've seen that before. And I'm like, my mind's going, it's like, oh my gosh, I ripped that scene off. And that scene's in Terrible Twos. When
that's great.
When Jeff Norris, he's in the hallway and he's locked out and he's knocking on the neighbor's door. He looks over and there's 4 girls in the hallway just standing there, and they just laugh at him.
That's right.
And it cuts back, and my wife being one of those women in the hall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I ripped off this scene. I didn't even realize it, you know. And I think that's funny because, like, to the point of the whole blog is that filmmakers do it all the time.
Yeah.
We do it all the time.
Well, did you realize you did that?
No. When I was doing Terrible Twos, I thought, like, well, this would be funny. He'll be stuck outside. He's locked outside of his apartment in a towel and flip-flops. And he cuts to the girls. But when I saw Seven Chances recently, and I've seen this film before, but when I saw this last week, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I ripped off Buster Keaton.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you didn't rip off. You just repeated something that's probably been repeated a million times.
Yeah, and but it's like almost shot for shot, and I thought that was very funny.
Wow, that's cool. That's actually
fun.
cool. Being as you're such a big Buster fan.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize
you were channeling him and didn't even
realize that. But to the point with him proposing to the teenage girl, there is a series of sequences where he proposes to one girl and she opens a paper and you realize she's Jewish. You know,
there's a lot of sensitive stuff going on.
Really, a lot of stuff, and there's a lot.
He tries to propose to 2 guys.
Right.
He tries to propose to an African American woman, and it's like it's very sensitive stuff going on there.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that when you're watching it and you're watching films of this era, it happens, and it was like there was an accepted ideology of what could be made fun of and what could be poked at.
I thought that was surprising, some of that stuff that was happening in the film.
It's a little more than usual in a Buster Keaton film. You know?
And it's weird because you don't really associate Hollywood with being, you know, racist, off color or whatever. But in the 20s, this stuff was accepted a little bit more. But I don't know if it was the guy. What was his name? Jules Cowles. He played the handyman. The guy that helped him out, the hired help, I think is what he's called.
Okay.
When I was first watching that, I thought he was a white guy painted up in black.
Yeah.
Did you?
I was still on the fence. Really, I was watching. I was like, I don't know what to believe anymore.
Well, that's the thing is, I know they used to do that back then. You know, with
Birth of a Nation. D.W. Griffith did that,
and the real famous jazz singer,
right?
You know,
Al Jolson, right?
Yeah. So, plus I thought maybe it had something to do with the quality of that version that was on YouTube, because I thought the guy actually had black gloves on too. But I looked closer and like they didn't look, so I'm thinking it's paint. It's gotta be paint.
Right.
So I went in and did some research, and it turns out he's a character also in The Lost World. And he really is African American.
Interesting.
So I was like, okay, they didn't paint a white guy up, which I thought would be ridiculous.
Right. You almost breathe a little easier when you find out something
exactly.
like that.
Because, I know it was done because, Benny Hill used to do that on his show in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah.
And I don't know Benny Hill personally, but I'm going to go on a limb and say he's not that kind of a person who does that. I think he would do those kind of skits that way to look silly, just to be silly. Like, look at this guy with the black paint all over him.
But you got to admit, it definitely could be considered offensive what Benny Hill did and what Al Jolson did. And,
absolutely.
There's a great. I'm going to cut you off. There's a great film that I watched. I was in a class at Westchester, and it's about communication and representation. And there's a film, and it might be on YouTube. It's called Ethnic Notions, and it studies these different characters that have been developed within Hollywood, particularly in the early first 50 years of Hollywood, of African American personalities. Like the hired hand, the helpful hired hand, or Mammy, or the Samba, which is was a stereotype of a black man who appreciated music and partying more than doing his chores, and would lie to get out of work, and they were obviously not positive role models or stereotypes or whatever you want to call them. They they were bad, and they pigeonholed characters and what African Americans could play. And we talked about this back when we did podcasts for Gone with the Wind. You know, Hattie McDaniel, she was the first African American to win an Oscar, and she's playing the slave in Gone with the Wind, and it's everything you would expect from a stereotype of a slave in the Civil War. And it's a problem that Hollywood has dealt with. And I know you're saying like you don't think of Hollywood as racist. I think nowadays when you walk into a comedy, you expect there to be offensive material, and you expect everyone to be offended. I think it was Mel Brooks who said, if you're going to offend anybody, offend everybody. Yeah. You know, and that kind of, now everything's fair game, for better or for worse. But back in the day, it was not fair game for everybody, and which makes people like Richard Pryor and Eddie Murphy back in their heyday so brilliant and so genius with what they did, because it's not necessarily their turn or turning the tables. Yeah. It's taking advantage of a system that existed for the longest time for only a select group. Yeah. You know, and it's what makes it brilliant. This is actually a really good segue for us to get into episode 1, because the connection between Seven Chances.
Oh, here we go. The connection.
The connection is a physical stunt gag, but I wanted to talk more about how it radiates out from that gag. So, in Seven Chances, when he's being chased by the hundreds and hundreds of brides, and he goes through the construction site and goes cross country, there is a scene where he goes on the top of a mountain range and he goes down a hill, and in the process of going down the hill, he inadvertently, Buster Keaton's character, Shannon, he inadvertently starts an avalanche, and all these rocks and boulders start chasing him, and it's a very comical scene. And then to escape that, he runs down the hill, hides behind a tremendous big Raiders of the Lost Ark size boulder, which as the rocks begin to pile up on that gives way, and then he's running away from these boulders, and it's very funny because you have a couple reaction shots that are medium to close on Buster, plus the wide shot of the mountain. And yes, Buster did his own stunts. For those who are new to Buster Keaton, he did everything himself. So it's the wide shot sells it, because you see all these rocks, and he's running down the hill. Well, when he gets to the base of the hill, what's waiting for him at the base of the hill? The angry brides. So then he has to stop and think, what's more dangerous? This angry mob of women or these boulders? So he turns and goes up the mountain into the boulders, and it's even funnier, because you know he just ran away from all this chaos. That particular scene is the scene that is directly referenced in episode 1, and it's referenced in the end battle with Jar Jar. And there is a scene where the Gungans are fighting the battle droids. They're fighting the Trade Federation in that wide open space. And then they decide they're going to retreat, and then they retreat. And in the retreat process, Jar Jar jumps on the back of a kind of a cart, and he accidentally pulls down the back hatch, and all these blue energy balls come bouncing out, and he runs away. I'm so sorry. And he's running away, and the balls come out. And when I saw Seven Chances the first time after seeing episode 1 in theaters, I'm like, oh, that's so cool. That's so cool that they decide to pick this gag. But there's two interesting notes I want to get before we kind of get distracted. So that's the main connection between these two. But what was cool is...
That's awesome.
Yeah. What was really cool is, first, in Seven Chances, that whole scene was an improv scene.
Yes, it was... Like accident.
Yeah, right? they were showing rushes, or showing a rough cut to a test screen audience, and one of the characters in the screen actually kicked off some rocks, and they started falling, and the audience laughed. And Buster heard that, and then went and shot that avalanche scene, and which I just think is great. That's the mark of a true artist. He saw something that the crowd wanted, and he went out and he got it, and it is by far the best scene in that movie.
And that's pretty cool that the whole test audience idea started back then.
Yeah,
too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like it was just great that he listened to it and he did it and it worked. But the bigger point I want to make with that is, like, I think it's very interesting that it is Jar Jar who's referenced to Buster Keaton, because to your point, Buster Keaton, he's kind of like this man child. He's this innocent person. He's out of his element, and he's a silent film. Yes, he has the placard lines of dialogue, but he really can't speak for himself. Yeah. And then you have, who do you have? You have Jar Jar, who doesn't speak in basic for the Star Wars nerds, but English for the rest of us. And he can't communicate well. He's a very physical character, very clumsy character. Yes, it is overdone, but that classic scene with the energy balls is a direct nod to this is the type of humor and type of film that George Lucas is pulling from for this character. Now, why it's interesting for Jar Jar is two reasons. Jar Jar, of course, is the most hated Star Wars character of all time. I spent how many years has it been since '99? You know what? I can't. Again, more math.
Yeah.
But see, so 2009 would be 10 to 3, so it's been 13 years.
13 years now. Okay. Yeah.
So with Episode 1 back in theaters this past spring.
Yeah.
I'm still defending Jar Jar. Mm-hmm. People are coming up like, yeah, but Jar Jar stinks. And
That's fine.
You know, and I since '99 am saying like, yeah, but it's based on Buster Keaton, like, and kids like him and whatever. So it's kind of interesting that, but the more important thing is the character of Jar Jar. Lucas once again came under harsh criticism as far as it being a racial stereotype, as far as him being like this gunky, dumb, character and like a Jamaican character.
Yeah.
And Lucas denied it, and he got under fire for other characters in Episode 1. Watto being very Arab-like, and the Trade Federation guys being very kind of greedy Japanese type. But I know because Jar Jar was such a hate magnet across the board, he got a lot of the press as far as being a racial slur. And so
I'll go on the record as saying that I don't hate Jar Jar. I just thought he was out of place. I just don't think he should have been in there.
Yeah. Well, the problem is from the step outside the film criticism world and go into the Star Wars geek world.
Sure.
Is that
let's do it.
Is Jar Jar was sort of the prequel equivalent to Chewbacca. Like, he's the good guy alien, and Chewbacca's awesome and Jar Jar is not. You know, so he right out of the gate, he had big shoes to fill. I know Chewbacca doesn't wear shoes. We don't say it. He had a big role to fill, and he couldn't fill it. And
did Lucas ever say why he never brought another Wookiee into? I mean, I know they do the Wookiees. I think in the third one, but. Did he ever say why he didn't just go to another Wookiee for the first two?
I think he was trying to reinvent himself, and I know a lot of fan sites out there also said that Jar Jar was trying to like tap into that Jurassic Park dinosaur thing, and whatever.
Yeah.
But
I was just curious.
No, he never did. To answer your question,
I mean that probably would have saved him all his grief.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people would have said he's making the same film over again.
That's true.
Which more or less.
But then again, he brought R2-D2 and 3PO back, and it's like no one complained about that.
Right.
So.
Well, he also said that one of the storytelling devices, and we talk about this in the Hidden Fortress digging Star Wars, is when he was scripting the Star Wars story, he thought it was funny to portray a huge galactic epic conflict by centering around what happens around two low-level characters.
Yeah.
So in Hidden Fortress, it's the two servants. You know, in Star Wars, it's R2 and 3PO. It's droids. It's slaves, basically.
Yeah.
So to get back to the whole racial element to these two films, I thought it was very interesting that, to your point, you're finding these things in Seven Chances, which I do not deny are there. They are there. And there's that same unfortunate tinge to Star Wars with Episode 1. And in particular with the character Jar Jar that's based on Buster Keaton.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You know, and I don't know, I mean, like, again, the concrete tie is that gag with the energy balls and the Gungan plane and Jar Jar with, you know, as direct reference to the boulder chase with Buster. Thanks to DJ Jay Dubious, who supplied today's music. Very cool stuff, and you can find more of his work on SoundCloud, so search for Jay Dubious. That's capital J, capital D, U-B-I-O-U-S. Okay, so there's a lot there to think about with Seven Chances, and the last thing I want to do is deter people from seeing it. Like,
no, I would definitely see it.
You know,
it is definitely something that needs to be seen.
And I think because of the not only the church gag and the great chase scene, but there's these little moments in the film that have been duplicated, like you said, in other films, and felt very Jar Jar. There's a great scene where he like runs through a stream, and when he comes out, there's this turtle, and it's attached to his tie, and it just kind of, it reminded me a lot of, like, again, Jar Jar in Watto's shop with, like, all the things clamped to his ears and his hands, and like just kind of like he can't help but get into trouble. So I will go out and say this: that if you hate Jar Jar, watch a Buster Keaton film, watch Seven Chances, or watch one of the other ones we mentioned, The General or Sherlock Jr. is great, to kind of get it, like what at least what Lucas was trying to do, like see it done right. If you don't think it was done well with Jar Jar, and if you are one of those rare people that like Jar Jar and that will defend him, this is definitely worth watching. And I will say this: while there are these kind of outdated tones with some of the racial stuff, not every Buster Keaton film's like that. I want to go on record for saying that.
Yeah.
A lot of his earlier work has that, especially when he was working with multiple partners. But as time went on, they weren't. And I know that, like in the case of The General and Sherlock Jr., that when I showed them to my sons at a very early age, I'm going to say they were 4 or 5, they loved them. And they loved them because of the big physical spectacle and, the things that Buster's able to do with a stunt and a close-up, and then go into that wide shot and seeing total mass chaos. The one book I have kind of put it best, how, like, Buster Keaton has a great way of making, like, the whole world come after him, because the whole world comes crashing down on him. The boulders come crashing down on him. A house will fall on top of him. A train will fall with him on it. And he just is extremely talented and a great magician with film in pulling that off. And Keaton worked well into his latter years. He appeared in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. He appeared in It's Mad, 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 Mad World. And he usually appeared with the classic flat straw hat and the tie and the flat cowboy type tie. And just that, like you said, just that deadpan, straight face. All like you look at him, and you feel sorry for him with that face, And it's great that he kept working, and he just had a great sense of humor, and he loved film.
Yes,
you definitely got that.
Usually, the guys who act, direct, choreograph, do just about everything.
The stunts
are the ones that love film and just know how to do it.
And that's why it's such a joy to watch his work, because he not only knows the stuff, but he's enjoying himself. Special thanks to my good friend and previous guest on Digging Star Wars, Josh Tabak, who has supplied our Season 3 logo. Yes, that is me, believe it or not, in various Star Wars attire. So thanks again, Josh. I really appreciate it. Let's get on with it.
Like Chris mentioned earlier, I do a podcast myself. It's called The Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies. And we base it off of this book, The 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. 7 Chances is in the book. In my podcast, I like to grade the movies. We always assign a letter grade to the movies, and Chris has been nice enough to let us grade 7 Chances now in his podcast.
Absolutely. It counts, right?
Yeah, it counts. It's going to count, definitely. Like I said, it felt like they kept shooting themselves in the foot in some parts. Like they would do one really good thing and then do a crappy thing. Do another good thing and do another crappy thing. There'd be one good shot, and then they would follow it up with a lame shot.
Right.
But then you get to the chase, and there's your payoff. So you could say the first half of the movie stunk, and the second half of the movie was fantastic.
Which, if you want people to walk out of the movie theater, you want the good stuff at the end.
Yeah.
If you want them to walk out happy, I should say.
That's true. But you also need to keep them till then, too.
That's true. That's true.
But again, this is definitely a movie you need to see. It's Buster Keaton. It's required viewing. I mean, just because of the fact that it's Buster.
And it's easy to watch. You can go on your computer and watch it.
Yeah, it's 56 minutes, I believe.
Yeah, it's not even an hour.
4 parts on YouTube.
Yeah.
So I'm going to lean towards a C+. I was going to go C, but I bumped it up a hair just because it's Buster. I mean, and even Buster, from what you were saying, even Buster was kind of mad at this movie. So,
it's his least favorite film.
Yeah.
Which is, one film has to be his least favorite film, I guess he
and like I said, usually my measuring stick is The General, and
which is him at his best.
Actually, my favorite so far is The Cameraman. But
yeah, well, Sherlock Jr. is good. Electric House is great. I'm a big fan of another Buster Keaton film called 1 Week, which is really, really funny. And that's got the famous house scene where the house falls on him. And he
well, Steamboat Bill has the one that falls on him, and it's the one where the window...
It's the same gag.
Yeah.
It's like I guess... when you talk about Buster Keaton stunts, that's the one that comes to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the most famous one. That was used in like a homeowner's insurance commercial or something
It's
about
been used
10,
a lot.
15 years ago.
Weird Al used it in his music video for Amish Paradise as well.
Yeah. It's an iconic shot.
Yeah, it really is.
But those movies are definitely A's. And I just feel like those movies were light years ahead of this one. So I'm still being kind of nice to it. I still say people have to watch it. But as a critical grade, I'm going to slap him for some of his bad shots. And it just seemed like it was a little lazy in the beginning. So C+ for me.
Wow. Before I grade, I want to know, do you think it deserves to be in the book? Do you think
No, I don't think it deserves to be in the book. I believe people should see it. Just because it's part of film history.
Right.
It's Buster. The chase at the end is worth it.
Yeah, the chase at the end is great.
I don't think it should be in 1001 book, though.
Wow, okay. As far as grading Seven Chances and with its connection with Star Wars, I'll give it a B+, and that is extremely generous, and I realize that. But the thing is, I've watched this movie now probably 5 times, and every time I watch it, I laugh. And I know I've seen the Boulder scene 5 times. I've read about it. I've seen it, in articles. And when you're watching it, my jaw's on the ground. I'm still like, this is so funny, and it's so great. And he did it. I'm looking at it like, I can't believe he did this scene. This is so cool, And in 1925, so
that's the amazing thing about having to watch these. Is they're 1925.
Yeah,
they didn't even have. I don't even think they had unions to protect people from getting hurt, and yet Buster's out breaking every bone in his body doing these movies.
Yeah,
and it was like, oh my god.
Yeah, so I really enjoy the movie, and it certainly has its flaws, and I get that, but it's worth seeing. And if you are a Star Wars fan, you should definitely see it. So anyway, that's 7 Chances. So we hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we hope that you check it out. You can listen to, I don't know where you're listening to this episode, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube, or you saw the link on Twitter or on SoundCloud or on our blog, which is diggingstarwars.blogspot.com. Thank you. You can certainly check that out. And I always encourage listeners to leave comments, and you can leave it on any of the sites I just mentioned, or you can email me at diggingstarwars@gmail.com. And I would encourage you, if you're on YouTube, if you're on SoundCloud, to look up Phil's podcast, Dying Breed Movie Club Meets the Movies.
So Chris and I actually did a simulcast.
Oh, that's right.
We recorded my podcast where we did Clash of the Titans and Ray Harryhausen,
which is currently up and running,
and we touched upon Mysterious Island, but then we saved a huge bulk of our conversation about Mysterious Island for Chris's podcast that's coming up.
Yeah, for our next episode of Digging Stars. That's right. Our next episode of Digging Stars, we explore
Mysterious
Island, Ray Harryhausen's Mysterious Island from the 60s, and its connection to Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. That was very interesting because on Phil's podcast, there isn't just one guest. There's more of a round table.
I try to get at least 4.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of sitting in on Phil's podcast, and then when we started talking about Mysterious Island for Digging Stars, we were also fortunate enough not only to have Phil join in the discussion, but Randy Petrus and Corey Yachtus.
Exactly.
And it was a very interesting conversation, and Corey in particular had been asking me for a while to guest star, so it was kind of cool that
we finally got him in, and he did both at the same time.
Yeah, and,
awesome.
And the stars aligned. So come back and check in. We'll hope to put that episode up within a month's time, and keep coming back, because this season really does promise to be a really good one. So thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for listening, and thank you for coming back. And Phil, thank you once again.
Oh, no problem, Chris.
So, bye.
Bye.
Digging Star Wars is produced by Mich Media and has no connection to Lucasfilm Limited whatsoever. Copyrights for films, trademark characters, and related materials discussed in Digging Star Wars remain with their respective owners. For a list of references or source material, please send an email to diggingstarwars@gmail.com.